wrong? What is wrong?
Well, it's basically a simple concept. It's the freedom of speech. Whether or not I, as a writer of songs, am able to express myself in any damn way that I want to, whether or not somebody likes it or not.
Okay.
That's at the core of it.
We'll be back. You've heard. The issue is music, labeling, lyrics. Many points of view. We'll talk about all of those in just a moment. Music, the lyrics in music, and the effect that they can have on young people, and whether or not, as an industry, the recording industry should try to control or to label them in such a way as to alert parents about what is contained therein. Patricia Greenfield, I had to cut you off in the first segment. I want to get back to start with you. What is your perspective in terms of what impact lyrics and music videos like the one we just saw in Jess Marlowe's report really have on the young people who watch them and who learn those words?
Well, we know from our research on television that the visual images do have an impact, and that visual images in general, not talking about music, but we can apply this to music, that visual images do have a bigger impact than words. And I would suggest that more good could be done by labeling rock videos than by labeling lyrics. And in fact, if you look at that video we saw in the opening clip, I Don't Want to Take It Anymore, there's nothing wrong with the lyrics. It's the image that went with them that is violent. And I think we should label that.
I see Gene Simmons shaking his head, and I see you got... Well, Gene, you go first, and then we'll come back over
so
to...
now we're off. Thank you. Now we're off the lyrics. So the lyrics now seem to be okay. Okay, so I accept that. So let's get to the real quick point, and I'll make it very brief and concise. The imagery. It's violent and stuff. I strongly urge anybody concerned with the amount of violence shown on TV to quickly turn their channel to the news or watch a football game and watch people mauling each other.
I'd like to take football off, too.
Well, now, let's not get too far. Now, that's another show. We'll invite you back for that show another time.
I'm glad that we're seeing what some of these people really think. You know, John Denver, when he testified before the Senate, said about that particular video that it showed a healthy teenage fantasy. I don't think there's any kid that hasn't dreamed at one time of throwing their parent out the window. And I think it's so perverse in a year when musicians have provided such good role models for kids, teaching them about compassion, worried about starving people, worried about the American farmer. Last year I produced a series of voter registration spots for MTV with Cyndi Lauper, Huey Lewis, and others, urging young people to vote. Bruce Springsteen, every city he goes into, donates some of his money to a food bank in that town. These are the healthiest role models that kids have, and yet a tiny, tiny minority of song lyrics are being held up and trumpeted on the airwaves by senators' wives and branding everyone with the same brand. And you know, when you find out what some of these parents groups really think, like the PMRC, the president of the PMRC has said that Bruce Springsteen's song, I'm on Fire, is a dirty song. And this shows how crazy a rating system would be where an artist like Bruce Springsteen could be rated as being dirty.
What about that?
Some of the things he said.
Well, let me ask, give Mrs. Downs in here first, because I'm curious if, as Mr. Goldberg just says, there is a way in which you can legitimately rate records and lyrics, isn't there?
I think so. We've lived for a long time with the motion picture ratings, and it doesn't preclude anyone from going to a movie. It simply tells them what that movie is going to be, and it's not legislated. It's a voluntary action on the part of the movie producers and the movie theater owners. So as far as I see, lyrics could be done in exactly the same way by a group of people within the industry, and if there are only just 2 or 3 really rotten ones, you know, those are the 2 or 3 that'll have the labels.
Mrs. Greenfield? Ms. Greenfield.
I'd like to respond to a couple of things that you said. First of all, I think it's great that rock stars are doing all of these positive and socially conscious things, and those, I think you were saying, those are important role models for kids. They're having an impact. Okay, by that same logic, if the good things that rock stars do has an impact, so does the bad. So there is something to be concerned about. The other point I'd like to make in response to what you said is this business about fantasy versus reality. That is a healthy teenage fantasy. The problem is we know from our research that television has a certain reality, and that even adults cannot differentiate between what's supposed to be fantasy and what's supposed to be reality. And I think that is the real danger of that scene where the person goes through the window, is it looks real. There's glass breaking, the guy is really falling.
Well, first of all, there's no blood. Secondly, you know, you have to, as Gene said, look at these things relative to social values, and there's more violence on Starsky and Hutch or on the evening news than there is in music videos. But I really want to respond to what Norma said. There is no comparison between the film rating system and the proposed record rating system. Film ratings are based on factual criteria. Is there nudity or isn't there? Are there four-letter words or not? Record ratings, because of the nature of song lyrics and the poetic, interpretive nature of songs, would be based on the personal interpretations and opinions of a group. There are no four-letter words that are on records that are played on the radio, and yet the PMRC has attacked...
Wait, what did you say? There are no four-letter words?
On records that are played on the radio. The FCC rightly regulates shows like this and radio stations.
I'm sorry, but I've heard some. I mean, whether they should have been there or not, on occasion, they do get onto the airways. Now, are you saying to me that that's not the case?
There has not been a hit record that has gotten repeated airplay that has had a four-letter word.
Now, that's a different statement than your original.
You know, I have never heard a four-letter word. I don't know. I don't monitor 2,000 radio stations. But what I'm saying is that people aren't just talking about four-letter words. You know, most record companies print lyrics in their records and so forth.
Let me ask you this, and I'll get back to you, Gene.
That's fine.
The RIAA, the Record Industry Association of America, correct?
Yeah.
Says that they're considering some kind of a labeling. Now, isn't that an indication that at least that organization feels that there is a need for something or other?
I think that the head of that organization felt intimidated by senators' wives and in a misguided way thought that this would be a compromise that might appeal to them and to the creative community. It appeals to neither. The PMRC is insisting on a rating system, and a rating system is completely horrible to all creative people. We can't imagine any labeling system that would be fair, because the song lyric is based on a personal interpretation. People in Washington have accused Bruce Springsteen, Michael Jackson, Cyndi Lauper, mainstream artists, of being dirty. And this is so deeply offensive to people in the music business that we are terrified of any stickering or rating system. But I want to point out that historically record companies from time to time have of their own free will put stickers on to inform the consumer, retailers, and radio people. This is going to continue to happen.
I want to interrupt you because I'd like to get back to that point, and I'd also like to ask you when we come back, Gene, because Gene is the only one of us that I'm aware of who has actually written any lyrics to a song that has been recorded.
Lyrics.
And questionable ones. We'll be right back. Please stay with us. That issue will continue in a moment. About those lyrics in the songs that some find so offensive and others are trying to protect as a First Amendment right and creative rights and so on. Well, with us, Gene Simmons from the rock group KISS. You've written songs, and some have gotten the group some negative publicity. As a question, though, what do you write them, what do you have in mind, is what I'm trying to say, when you write some of these lyrics, particularly the ones that have been, shall we say, controversial?
The truth is that when you sit down to write a song, the musical feel of the song will dictate what the lyrics will be. Usually it's just sort of rhythmic. We deal in exciting imagery, usually. Girls are usually the things we talk about. Maybe not as poetically and as flowery as some of the other artists. But I want to get to a really important point here, which is something that I've been thinking about for this whole conversation, which is the ladies and us talked about this before we got on camera, and I said, don't you see where this is going? I don't like all records that come out. I think some are in awful taste. Who's going to decide what records are going to be rated? And if you're going to rate records, let's assume for a second that's going to happen, books are next, okay? I mean, that's the obvious next point. Books are next. You obviously take the largest selling book of all time and make sure that that's rated, because more people have read that than any other book. It's the Bible, folks. A lot of violence, a lot of sex. The word sodomy comes from Sodom and Gomorrah. Lots of people begetting, he begat her, she begat him, lots of stuff. What are you going to do, rate the Bible? What are you going to do, give it an R, X?
Is that a fair comparison, do you think?
I believe it is, because I said before, we talked about it, you start a brush fire, there's no end to it.
Even you, though, said that you find some songs distasteful. If you were to determine that there was an alarming, quote-unquote, trend of distasteful music permeating the airwaves, would you be concerned? And as an industry, what could you do about it?
There is.
What we do is make better records. You know, I mean, one of the things that excites us is all of the positive, good records that have become successful. And, you know, most of the groups that are quoted by the PMRC are obscure groups that never got any publicity before this campaign.
Prince is not obscure. Madonna is not obscure.
I believe that's healthy. I like Prince and Madonna.
I'm a fan of Prince, too, but the music that they're talking about, and I'm not speaking for the PMRC.
Well, when they say sadomasochism, you know, and bondage and all these things, Prince doesn't sing about those issues, the occult and so on and so forth.
No, but there's
a lot of distortion going on.
Well, now, that may be true, but there is also a lot of sexually explicit material contained.
We're allowed to do that in this country. I don't go to porno shops. I don't read those magazines with nudity. I don't like some of the records that come out. But folks, we're talking about a very real issue here, I think, which is, are you allowed to express yourself the way you feel, whether somebody else likes it or not, or are you not? Are we in America or are we in Russia? It's not about records we're talking about. We're talking about whether the premise of America works or not.
Well, let me ask I have a loaded question for you, and I'll admit that it's loaded before I ask. But are you parents or not parents? Because part of the issue seems to be that parents are concerned about what their young people are hearing. And I say that as a parent, and I'm wondering what your responses would be along that line. Would you please?
Yeah, I think as a parent, I think a good compromise, because of the difficulties of reading what's essentially poetry, because kids really feel rock music as their own. It's a symbol of rebellion. They need that in forming their identities. Because of these difficulties, and yet at the same time, the desire for parents, for their children's welfare, I think a good compromise would be to have the lyrics available. We don't know how the kids interpret the lyrics. If you had the lyrics available...
But they are available already, is their point.
On the outside. Sure. In every record album? I thought only in some.
Well,
have them available in every record album, and perhaps even preferably outside, but at least inside. So that parents could find out whether their kids are even thinking about the lyrics, how they understand them. If there is a problem, they would be able to discuss them with them. I think that would be a good compromise that wouldn't get into the problems that have been brought up in rating, but would allow parents in an efficient manner, because most parents are busy, they work, they don't have the time to listen to every song. Plus, as you pointed out before the show, they're not even mixed, so you can hear the lyrics.
Let me ask,
and kids may not even notice them, but at least you wouldn't have...
I don't mean to cut you off, but I must. On the parent issue, does that make a difference, do you think? And are you a parent, by the way?
I don't have any children that I know of. And so in that sense, I'm not a parent.
Would it make a difference to you if you were a parent and your 11-year-old daughter came home reciting some sexually explicit lyrics she heard?
No, because my contention is that the most sexually explicit language that young people are going to be hearing are on the streets. They can't even hear the lyrics in rock music. Okay. The way we mix our records is we don't sing sort of like Perry Como, you and I love each other, where you can understand every word. That's not the kind of music we're involved in. It's garbled. It's because it's better that way. It's got more spice. It moves better. I defy you to pick up any rock record and tell me what they're singing about.
Oh, I can agree with that.
You agree with that?
I agree with
we
that
have some
wholeheartedly.
Okay.
Because I've tried to listen, and it's impossible for me. Either my brain doesn't assimilate those sounds properly or something. But,
subject's closed.
But
well, then why are you concerned? We're running out of time, but why be concerned if you don't even know what you're hearing?
When you hear those over and over and over again, and young people have much more acute hearing than I do, and they then talk about it between themselves. So they begin to understand what the words say. Oh, the kids know what's
By
popular.
the way, have you heard the new lyric on the new Prince record?
Sure,
Did you know
have.
what that's? Oh,
sure they
come
do.
on. I bet you most of them like. You know, you ever watch American Bandstand and say, "I give that record a 90 because I can dance to it. I like the beat." What's the lyrics say? I don't know. I like the way it feels. I don't buy it at all for a second.
You brought up the effect on books and things like that. It takes a while to get through a book.
I don't agree. I think it's instantaneous, and it was proved in Nazi Germany.
But you have to read the whole book, and where you hear the same music over and over again, probably the same
When
way.
I was a kid, I just looked for the good parts of the book.
Well, I did too. Good points, all of you, but we got to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Hope that you've learned something about the issue of music labeling. We didn't get to the answers necessarily, but one suggestion everyone seems to agree on: listen to the music yourself and talk with your children about it. Thank you for being with us.
Monday, Jane Fonda visits the new TV show that has a little bit of everything. Discover America with Sarah Purcell, Stuart Damon, and McLean Stevenson. Monday at 3:30.